So to quickly touch upon, Solva is a web-based application that helps assess the economic and environmental benefits of integrating distributed energy systems into the grid. This tool basically helps the grid operators, people like policymakers and researchers to make their work more easy. So next slide, please. We have a few items on the agenda for today. So first, we will give you some background information on renewable energy. Then we will introduce you to the Solva tool. After that, we will talk about power flow analysis, and finally, we will touch upon this order analysis part. So by order, we mean value of distributed energy resources. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now let's quickly take a look at a renewable energy snapshot of India. So as you could see on the right pane, the pie chart clearly represents that the electricity generation share of India as of FY22, we could clearly infer that coal being the major shareholder with over 73%, and followed by that large hydro holds 10%, and then the RE comes into play. So we could clearly understand that India has done a good job, but yeah, let's get into the some of the key targets that we have in place. So India has done a good job in reducing the emission intensity of GDP by 24% between 2005 and 2016. And now we have also promised to make it even better by reducing the emission intensity further by 45 percentage by 2030 compared to the 2005 levels. So in addition to this emission targets, we also have this net zero target by 2070 to be achieved. To do this, we want to use more clean energy, obviously. So initially, we had set a goal of 175 gigawatt of renewable energy to be met by 2022. But then due to COVID outbreak and several other reasons, uh, by end of 2022, India had reached close to 121 gigawatt of clean energy, which is almost 70% of our goal, which I feel is a significant achievement. Now government has progressed forward, so they have taken a step ahead, planning to meet 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel energy by 2030, which is an ambitious target, and I hope we could meet it soon. And next, in line with this, Ministry of Power has also set an renewable purchase obligation targets for the state. And I think in that by FY30, we are supposed to meet close to 43% of RPO targets. And they've also made it better by giving segregations for wind, hydro, and storage. They've given separate obligations to make it much better. Next slide, please. Yeah, so now let's get into a state example. So let's talk about Tamil Nadu. So as we could see on the right pane again, the pie chart here again shows that RE capacity holds the major share. Close to 52% of the state installed capacity is RE. However, Tamil Nadu, in terms of the generated energy, in terms of generation share, the renewable energy accounts to only 21%. So to tackle this and increase the RE share, Tamil Nadu has initially released its solar policy in 2019 with a target to meet close to 9,000 megawatt of solar energy by 2023. About 40% of this 9,000 megawatt was supposed to be come from distributed systems from the consumer category to increase the distributed share as well. However, Tamil Nadu has even a bigger plan for the future where the state has plans to add close to 33,000 megawatt of renewable energy by 2030. This would mean like close to half of Tamil Nadu's energy would come from clean energy sources compared to the current clean energy share of 21% I mentioned. So, which is a big step towards RE. And in terms of targets, yeah, so TNERC has also released the draft RPO targets, which is in line with the Ministry of Power targets. So same 43% share of 43% target has been assigned for 2030. So that's a quick snapshot and overview of the renewable energy stand currently in India, and we have given a state-specific example as well. So next slide, please. Yeah, so next would be the introduction of Solva. So now I'll just hand it over to Mr. Frano from Auroville Consulting, being the subject matter expert. I think he'll be taking us through this tool and demo. Over to you, Frano.
Uh, Thank you, Harish. Thank you for that introduction. I hope I'm audible to all the participants. And thank you, Sangeeta, for introducing the session. To introduce Solva, I think Harish has briefly explained and told that Solva is a web application that can be used for simulating and evaluating the economic as well as societal benefits of integrating distributed energy resource in the modern power system. How Solva does it? Well, Solva allows the user to take a DT level, a feeder level, as well as substation level power flow analysis. From the results of the power flow analysis, we use a methodology to determine the network benefits as well as societal benefits from that integration. Solva tool also can be used to identify system sizes and as well as dispatch strategies in case that battery is included to optimize this value of distributed solar and energy storage. Who can use the Solva tool? Who are the potential users that can benefit from Solva tool? We think that grid operators can use this tool, and they can use this tool to assess the network value of doing this integration. That is integrating DER on the distribution network. And DER, when I say it is a distributed energy resource connected to the distribution network below 33 kV voltage line. Regulators also can use this tool to inform the feed-in tariff setting process. That is, that regulators can use the tool and decide and set location-specific feed-in tariffs. Policymakers can use the tool to assess the societal value that can be determined using the methodology that is used in the Solva tool, which will be elaborated later in the presentation. Researchers can study and analyze the impacts of integrating DER on the network. Moving further to what are the steps that are involved in the Solva tool and how Solva tool does the analysis, there are two major steps that are involved. One is the power flow analysis, which takes into consideration the active power as well as the voltage that are generated or the voltage in the line. The second step is to determine the value of distributed energy resource. And we determine this value by finding out the network benefits as well as the societal benefits from the integration. So to further get into and understand what we do in the power flow analysis, I show you this diagram. And in this diagram, we see, as mentioned earlier, that Solva can take a DT level as well as a feeder level and substation level analysis. In this diagram, line diagram, you can see that on the left-hand side, you can see under DT that grid is connected to the DT, that is the distribution transformer, and we have three interconnection points. The furthest from the substation or from the DT would be the tail end. The closest to the DT or the substation and the feeder in this case would be the sending end. While in the middle, we have something called interconnection point called middle end. When I say DT, I mean distribution transformer. HT feeder is the high tension feeder, and a substation is beyond the feeder level from where the distribution network begins. So each of this analysis level will have three interconnection points, that is the tail end, middle end, and the sending end. The sending end will be closer to the point of grid interconnection. That is from where grid supply comes in case if it is on the distribution transformer level, it will be closer to the distribution transformer. In case it is on the high tension feeder level, it will be closer to the high tension feeder. and on substation it will be closer to the substation level. The tail end will be at the point of consumption, while the middle end will be at an approximately middle of that particular analysis level. So this is how we conduct, or this is where we conduct the power flow analysis. Further, to explain a little bit of what we consider into the VODER analysis, and as mentioned earlier by Harish, VODER is the abbreviation to value of distributed energy resource. To determine the methodology and to find out how we can determine this value, we took some existing research into consideration. There was a study conducted by CEW where they wanted to find out the value of grid-connected rooftop solar, and they had this study done with a distribution company in Delhi. Another study with respect to India was conducted by a research institute called NREL, which did the analysis again to find out the value of rooftop solar for Jharkhand and Gujarat. Taking these two researchers into consideration, as well as other existing researches that were done in other parts of the world, as shown here, we developed a VODER methodology that can be utilized for the Indian context and has been used to determine the network as well as the societal benefits in the Solva tool. So how do we do this in Solva tool? Under the network benefits, we have 4 categories that determine the network benefits. And we term it as avoided cost of energy, avoided distribution capacity cost, avoided transmission capacity cost, and avoided generation capacity cost. While for societal benefits, we assume that integrating the distributed energy resource locally in the distribution network will lead to lower pollution by contracting less energy and capacity from the generation of, assuming it is a thermal plant. So we would be avoiding the carbon dioxide emitted as well as the NOx as in SOx and particulate matter 2.5 from integration of DER on the distribution network. The total VODER benefit that is achieved from this integration is then the network benefit plus the societal benefit. To give a little bit of context on how we do this calculation, I'll be taking you briefly through the formulas and explaining you how we determine the avoided cost calculation, and further conduct a simulation so that you would know how to use the Solva tool to do a simulation for your analysis, as well as show you some features of Solva tool that can help you do the analysis. So moving further, to determine the avoided cost of energy, well, what we assume here is as distributed energy resource when integrated in the distribution network will replace the marginal generator, that is the highest cost centralized generator, and this will give us cost benefits. So we take the marginal cost that is paid for the electricity that is supplied by the thermal generator, and we replace whatever units are generated by the DER locally. We apply the distribution loss to it as well as the transmission loss and determine what is the cost per unit of electricity that is being avoided by integrating distributed energy resource on the distribution network. Further, to determine the avoided distribution capacity cost. So as you can see here, the formula takes into consideration the cost of upgradation as well as the difference of the year of upgradation for that particular equipment, be it the distribution transformer or the HT feeder or the substation. The upgradation that is required before introducing the distributed resource on the network, as well as the business and after introducing the distributed resource on the network. This upgradation would be required or deferred in case of integration of DER, and the difference of this upgradation is taken to calculate what is the cost that can be saved on a per unit basis. Further, to determine the avoided transmission capacity cost, again with the idea that having a distributed energy resource on the distribution network connected locally is going to help us reduce our requirement from beyond the transmission line. We would have no need to contract that capacity from the transmission line, and hence will be deferring the transmission capacity, which will then lead to avoided transmission capacity cost. If you notice in the formula, we have taken the cost into consideration as well as the DER capacity that has been integrated into the distribution network and something called capacity credit. To elaborate a little bit on the capacity credit and how do we calculate this capacity credit, as shown in this slide, we see that the capacity credit has been calculated with a formula that gives you what is the DER output for its capacity, and which is compared to top end transmission loads hours, that is the peak loads for 100 hours in this case has been taken into consideration, and how much of this peak is going to be covered from the DER that is being installed in the distribution network. We take this into consideration because as a simple case, in that distribution network, this solar is already existing, which is taking some part of the peak load during sunshine hours. Introducing another distributed resource on the distribution network would need to consider the net load profile. And if we consider the net load profile in this case, we will get a capacity credit that is eligible to provide us with the correct avoided transmission capacity cost, or else if we do not consider the net load profile in this case, then we would be overestimating the avoided transmission capacity cost here. So to be able to determine and estimate an accurate transmission capacity cost that is avoided, we have taken this term capacity credit to help us to determine the correct value. Further, to determine the avoided generation capacity cost, in case we avoid contracting capacity from the transmission line for the installed capacity of distributed resource on the distribution network, that would also mean that we would not have to contract capacity from the generation or the thermal plant that usually supplies us electricity. In this way, we then would have to contract less capacity from this thermal plant, avoiding a generation capacity cost. And this is the value that represents how much of the cost we have avoided per unit of electricity by integrating DER into the distribution network. As you can see from the formula, in this formula as well, we have taken into consideration the capacity credit, which is calculated as shown previously, where we try to determine how much of the distributed energy resource contributes in covering the top 100 peak loads in your load profile. Further, to determine these societal benefits, we use the environment health value for each of the pollutants, compare it with how much contribution has been provided by the integration of the DER on the distribution network, and determine a per unit cost for each of the pollutants that have been avoided from this integration. To find the environment health value, we present to you some values that are taken into consideration in the tool. As you can see, we have the value of avoided emission, that is in rupees per kg for each of the pollutant, as well as the emission rates that are considered from a thermal power plant. So in case if we are to avoid carbon dioxide, the NOx, SOx, and particulate matter 2.5, we take the combination of the value of avoided emission and emission rate to determine the environment and health value, which is then used to calculate the per unit avoided cost of these pollutants. As we have given the brief on how we do the methodology for determining the network and societal benefits, we will then take a look at the simulation on the Solva tool and show you how to do a simulation on this tool so that you can take this forward and do an analysis on the tool by yourself. So I will stop sharing the screen now and switch the screen to the Solva website. I would ask my colleague to maybe put the link of the Solva tool so that you can access the Solva tool on your own desktop in case if you are using the desktop. Please do confirm by maybe leaving in the chat thumbs up if you are able to see the if you are able to see the screen. Thank you for the confirmation. This is the home page and the landing page for the Solva tool. As you can see, if you have joined the Solva tool, you would need to register, and it would take you 24 hours to activate the email or your username password, and then you can use the tool to determine and do an analysis of your own. On this website, you can find out a bit more about the methodology in the About page, where you can download the methodology document and refer to it whenever required. To do an analysis, you could go to My Projects, and under My Projects, you can select a new project where you can then begin the simulation. For this simulation, we will do a high tension feeder level analysis. So I select a high tension feeder, and we will pick a technology that is only solar case. The other options are we could do an analysis with solar plus storage as well as only storage. Taking only solar as a technology for this scenario, we have to provide a unique name. I give today's date and proceed by clicking next at the bottom of the page. Here, you would have to define your feeder load profile. That is, if you have taken as we have selected feeder, we will have to define a feeder profile here. If I had selected a distribution transformer level analysis, I would then have to define a distribution transformer profile. There are two ways to define this profile. Either I can select an existing profile which you can upload and share. So when you're making an account, you will have the option to select or deselect sharing of your load profile that you have uploaded. In case if you do not want to share your data, then you can select a checkbox where it then takes into consideration and does not share the information that you have uploaded. But in case if you want to upload and allow others to use your load profile, you can uncheck that box, and that will allow anyone who is using the tool to take reference of the profile that you have uploaded. In this way, we are also trying to create a data repository for peers who can then take references of load profiles and other uploads that can be used for the analysis during Solva, using the Solva tool. So I will show you how to do an analysis, how to upload a profile or create a profile. You have to give a unique name, and you have to then upload a CSV file by providing the year for which that CSV file has the data for. This CSV file must contain two columns. One title with the title date and value. The date column should be formatted in date, month, year, space, hours, and minutes, while the value should have the value in megawatt. This file should contain 8760 data points representing hourly load profiles for the whole year. In case you want to do an analysis of a year that has a leap year, you would have 8784 points, and we would suggest to maybe eliminate the extra day and have upload only 8760 points, because otherwise you will find an error while uploading the information. So as I have already existing profiles of feeders that have been already uploaded in the tool, I select the high tension feeder Karungal-Palyam in this case. As you can see, as I have selected, you can find out a little bit more details about the Karungal-Palyam feeder. With these details, we get to know a brief information that it's an overhead feeder. It handles 22 kilovolt, has a power factor of 0.9, and is of almost 19 kilometers length. That is the length of the HT feeder. Further, we get into defining the state load profile. In case you want to use an existing profile, we have two existing profiles, that is the net load profiles for Tamil Nadu for 2020 and 2021. The reason we asked for net load profile is, if you remember during the presentation, as we spoke about the capacity credit calculations, if we upload a state load profile that is not a net load, we would be overestimating the resulting avoided generation capacity cost as well as the transmission capacity cost. To get an accurate value of these two avoided costs, we suggest that you upload a net load profile, which would be net load, that is minus your total load minus wind and solar generation that is existing in the state. Again, the format remains the same. That is, you will have two columns, the date and value column, date having the time and date format, and value in megawatt. In case if you don't have an 8760 points and you have only a peak load demand, that is the highest peak, and you have the time when that highest peak occurs, you can input these, and on the back end we do the calculation for 8760 points, and then we populate the data such that we can continue the simulation for the peak load demand provided and the time that peak load demand occurs. In this case, as we have an existing data, I will select the Tamil Nadu net state load profile for 2020 and proceed further. Here, the next field to enter is what is the state load distributed capacity addition? That is the existing state load distributed capacity addition in megawatts must be entered here. And this is to estimate the avoided transmission generation capacity benefits and helps to determine accurate avoided transmission and generation capacity cost. From our research, we know that 1250 megawatt of distributed capacity was added in the year 2020, for which data we have. Hence, I enter that number. And if you want, you can then go into the additional inputs that will help you in doing the analysis. To explain a bit here, we have set some values, standard values, and these can be modified according to your requirement. We propose to do an analysis of 25 years. We have a limit, that is the upper limit for capacity upgradation to 90%. Now, if the capacity is exceeded, in this case for the feeder, if this capacity is exceeded 5 times in a year, then it will suggest an upgradation in the next year. So if we find out that the HT feeder is handling a capacity of more than 90% for 5 instances in a year, then the tool will suggest an upgradation in the next year. Once the upgradation has been suggested, 50% of that load will be shifted to the new feeder once the upgradation has taken place. So if there is an upgradation suggested, 50% of the load from that feeder is shifted to the new feeder that is being suggested. And then the analysis continues to determine a 25-year analysis. The yearly increase is 5% in this case and can be modified according to your requirement. To define the conductor that has been used in this case, we have uploaded some details of different conductors, while you can also upload or you can also modify the values by selecting others and giving the values that you think is appropriate for your analysis. In this case, for the Karungal-Palya feeder is the raccoon conductor that has been used, and we will select the raccoon conductor and proceed by clicking next at the bottom of the page. As you can see on the screen, it says that feeder data cannot be modified once BAU analysis begins. So as you click yes, in this case, the BAU analysis will begin for this case. So you select yes and proceed further to define how much of solar capacity you would want to integrate on this network and at what interconnection point you would want to integrate this. So here we introduce 4.5 megawatt. However, I would like to also show you that for the conductors selected on the previous page, we have a limit that provides us to the maximum capacity that can be integrated on this distribution network or this HT feeder. In this case, for the raccoon conductor selected previously, it says that the value should be below or equal to 11.43 megawatt. However, to do an analysis, we start with a 4.5 megawatt and then see how the HT feeder behaves and determine if this value is beneficial to be integrated on this HT feeder or not. So as we select the 4.5 megawatt system, we then have to select the interconnection point at which we want to integrate this distributed energy resource. As mentioned earlier, the sending end would be closer to the feeder, while the tail end would be closer to the point of consumption. That is at the end of the feeder line. Middle end will be the approximate middle of this feeder line. I select the middle end for this case and proceed further by clicking Save and Next. Here we have to determine what is the marginal cost of energy to be replaced. In the presentation, as we told, we have considered that the marginal cost that could be replaced is from a thermal power plant, that is the coal power plant that is being replaced in this case. How to input these values? Well, we have three options to input these values. Either we can upload an 8760 data points, as mentioned earlier, with two columns, date and value. The date column having the date and time format, while the value being entered in megawatts. Or we can select cost as per IEX data, again, with a 8760 data points CSV file having two columns, the date and value. Or we can select a single value, which will then be applied to all the hours in the year, and you can find out if this value is a representation of your marginal cost and is being replaced by the integration of distributed energy resource on the network. We also have IEX data that have been already uploaded for this case, and it can be used by anyone who has signed up and logged in and made an account on the Solva tool. For this case, I will select a single value and I will give 4.35 rupees per kilowatt hour for the marginal cost of energy to be replaced. The average transmission loss, we consider 4% from the tariff order for the year 2020 and proceed further to maybe determine and modify the advanced inputs. These advanced inputs include transmission capacity cost, generation capacity cost, as well as the cost of upgradation in case an upgradation is being suggested. Here, you can also find the environmental and health values of each of the pollutants, which can be modified and changed in case you find a better value and you find an appropriate value for your analysis. To proceed further, you click Save and Run, and we have a pop-up saying that the data cannot be modified and the analysis will begin and asking us, do you want to proceed? Once we click yes, it again intimates us that the analysis will take some time and you will receive an email on the registered email ID once the analysis is complete. Here I would like to inform the participants that when you do an analysis, it takes at least 10 minutes to give back the answer. And once the analysis is done, you will receive an email and then you can come back to this Solva My Projects page where you can see the status of your simulation. As you can see, the yellow represents analysis in progress and the green represents analysis that is completed. So as we were aware that the analysis would take some time, I have already done this simulation and I can show you the results for this so that we can then see how the results are being displayed in the Solva tool. So as you can see here, the key findings are visible. In the key findings, we give what is the analysis level, the technology that has been selected, the size of the solar that has been selected, and as there is no storage, we find it 0. What is the contribution of solar to satisfy the load and the contribution from grid to satisfy the load? In the case that the distributed energy has been integrated in the distribution network, what is the instance voltage violation percentage? That is the instances of voltage violation for 1 year. What is the distribution loss that has been taken place and the transmission loss that has been mentioned for the analysis? we see that the network benefits achieved are 4 rupees per kilowatt hour, and the societal value is 8.84 rupees per kilowatt hour, giving us a total water benefit of 12.84 rupees per kilowatt hour. Further, when you scroll down, you find the inputs that have been mentioned, as it is a erode substation for the Karungal-Palyam feeder. It's an overhead feeder with solar connected at the middle end, having a peak load of 10.28 megawatt. For a snapshot, we see that we have got 4 results, that is the voltage violation percentage, the distribution loss percentage, the peak as percentage of feeder capacity, and capacity upgradation. So in the power flow analysis for the voltage violation percentage of hours in year 1, we see that in the BAU case, the instances of voltage violation beyond permissible limits were 4.17%, while this has reduced with the integration of DER, that is 4.5 megawatt DER on the Karungal-Palyam feeder at the interconnection point middle end. For the distribution, average distribution loss percentage, we see that in the BAU case, we have 5.59% loss that has been taken place. While with the integration, we see that the distribution loss percentage has reduced and is 4.72 in the case that the distribution, that the solar has been integrated on the network. With the peak as percentage of feeder capacity, and I see that in a chat it mentioned what is the feeder peak. To explain it simply, we could say that this is the peak load that is being handled by this particular feeder at a point of time. In this case, as you can see, that it is 104.33%. That is to say that at a point of time, the maximum peak that is handled by this feeder is 104% of its feeder capacity. If you remember, in the inputs, we had given that if we find a value above 90% of the feeder capacity for 5 instances in a year, it would suggest a capacity upgradation. So if you look at these last two snapshot results, where we see the peak as percentage of feeder capacity in year 1 and the capacity upgradations that are suggested, we see that in BAU case, we find that the peak load that is being handled by this feeder is 104%. And it suggests the first upgradation in the first year of the analysis, which says that there are more than 5 instances where the peak load is violating the feeder capacity for more than 5 instances. And hence, we see that the capacity upgradation is suggested in the first year. And in the 17th year, the second capacity upgradation is suggested for this particular feeder. However, with introduction of DER, we still see that the peak load that is managed and handled by this feeder is now 97%. Though it is lower than the BAU case, it is still above the limit that we have set, that is 90%. And hence, we see that in the DR case as well, it suggests the capacity upgradation for the first year. That is the first capacity upgradation. And the second capacity upgradation, if noticed in the BAU and DR case, shows a difference of 3 years. That is, with the integration of DR, we can defer the capacity upgradation of this feeder or the second upgradation for this feeder by 3 years. That is, in BAU case, we had to upgrade it in the 17th year, while with 4.5 megawatt distributed solar integrated at the middle end interconnection point on this particular feeder will allow to defer the upgradation by 3 years in the second upgradation. Further, we can then see that the load profile and the grid power details for 24 hours. In this case, we can manipulate the data range and see how this and see for more than one day. Here, to show you how the results can be achieved, I select a range of 1 week and click apply and view the results. The load is represented in dark green, while the grid in the BAU case in blue, and the grid contribution in DER case in light green. As you can see, during solar hours, the grid contribution reduces with integration of DER and as continues in similar way during solar hours throughout the whole week. We can also select a date range for the whole year and see how the load profile and the grid profile behaves for the whole year in this particular case. So then we can find out what is the contribution of grid in BAU case as well as in the DER case. The next graph that we see is the voltage profile. For the first day of the year, we see that the voltage profile during solar hours sees an improvement with the integration of DER. That is, that the profile had a lower voltage or was tending towards lower voltage, while with integration of DR, we can see that the voltage has increased. This allows us to find a stable voltage and reduces the instances of voltage violation during the analysis period. To find out how the voltage can vary over a period of time, we can further select a range of date and click apply to see how it varies during this time for that period. As you can see in this case, we do not find any violation neither on the lower side nor on the upper side, upper limit for the voltage profile. Further, we go and we find out what is the distribution loss and how distribution loss behaves over the period of 1 year with the integration of DER. As you can see, the blue line indicates what was the distribution loss in the BAU case, and the green line indicates what is the distribution loss when distributed solar is integrated on the distribution network. For this particular day, you can see that during solar hours, it helps in reducing the distribution loss as compared to BAU case. And this chart also can be manipulated to check for a date range and see how and where it helps to reduce or impacts the distribution loss percentage. With the DR power, the next graph that we see is the DR power balance. Here we can see the contribution of grid as well as solar in order to satisfy the load. In the time where there is no solar, we can see that most of the load has been satisfied by the grid and there is zero solar. While during solar hours, we see that solar contributes to a certain extent for the load and grid becomes almost zero during the peak. However, it does not become completely zero and still there is a minimum contribution by grid in this case. To find out how you can select a date range and see how it contributes over a period of time, or for a week, for a month, or for a year, in case if you want to do an analysis and check what is the impact and how the contribution of the solar that has been integrated helps you reduce your dependency on grid. We also provide the energy balance, that is the percentage share of solar to satisfy the load. In this case, we see that 15% has been satisfied by solar and 85% is being satisfied by grid. Further, we come to see how the network benefits are achieved as well as the societal benefits are achieved. Here you can see the contribution of each of the aspects, that is the avoided cost of energy, the avoided distribution cost, avoided transmission capacity cost, avoided generation capacity cost, resulting in a total of 4 rupees per kilowatt hour. The societal value that we have determined, which were avoided by avoiding the emissions of CO2, SOx, NOx, and particulate matter 2.5, we see contribute to a higher percentage. 69% of contribution of the total VODA is by the societal benefit, while 31% is contributed by the network benefit. The total of this gives us the value of distributed energy resource, that is the VODA, and we consider this as a total savings, which should be considered or taken into consideration while assessing the integration of DER on the distribution network. You can download this report with a download option on the top and further compare it with other simulations or other analysis that you have carried out for the same feeder or for a different feeder. As we give a per unit cost, the comparison becomes quite straightforward, and then we can take into consideration what upgradation or what capacity of DER can be integrated on that particular analysis level. I would stop sharing my screen here and return to the presentation to take few questions and answers in the session. I hope it is clear. If there are any questions, you can ask me now so that we can resolve the questions regarding the simulation here and then proceed to the presentation. I would repeat again and invite more questions. If anyone has questions regarding the tool as well as the simulation, so when we can resolve it immediately. Assuming everyone understood everything, I proceed toward stopping to share my screen and go to the presentation. I hope the screen is visible to everyone. Thank you for the confirmation. I again request the participants to unmute themselves and ask questions, or you can put it in chat and then we can take it one by one. If you don't have any questions now, we can leave our email IDs in the chat, and you can reach out to us, and you can reach out to us at a later point of time, and you can ask the questions whenever you would like to approach us. In that way, we can then reach out to you whenever you have a query, and we can take up your question there. I've left my email ID in the chat, so feel free to reach out to me whenever possible in case if you have any query with regard to doing a simulation or how the methodology works for the Solva tool. If we don't have any questions pertaining this Solva tool, I would like to point out that we have another webinar on determining the economical feasibility of rooftop solar for CNI consumers, which will be conducted on the 26th of August at 11 a.m. You can find the registration link and the details in the chat shared by Sangeeta or with the name Auroville Consulting. You can register for the webinar if you're curious to find out how to determine an economical feasible rooftop solar capacity. If we have no more questions, then I would like to end the session here. Okay, I see there's a question. Yes.
Hi. So thank you so much for the webinar. I just wanted to know that this Solva tool we are going to use to just understand the distribution, how solar or any other wind or any other storage that will be, if we integrate that to the distribution system, then how it will be beneficial, right? That's what it does.
Yes, in short. However, it adds an additional nuance to it where you find out one, the network benefits, as you mentioned, how it is beneficial. Additionally, it also calculates the societal benefits that you can achieve by integrating DR, that is producing locally and supplying locally, then avoids you to contract capacities at the generation unit, which then allows the generation unit to send in lesser units of electricity or produce less. Hence, we avoid the emission at the generation station. So this then takes into consideration the network as well as the societal benefits. However, we have been able to use the tool only for, or rather you could use the tool right now in its form for solar and solar plus storage and storage only. And we have not been able to integrate wind here. So you will not be able to do an analysis with wind.
Oh, all right. So the users or the customers for this will only be, if I am the customer, can I use it? If, or is it only applicable, or this tool can only be used by the utility companies?
To be brief, I think it would be more useful to the utility. However, if you are proposing to the utility, and it's a long shot that if you are proposing to the utility that you want to install such and such capacity on the distribution line, and they then use the tool to already do an analysis saying that this is the analysis that we have done using this tool, which then shows that you can achieve this benefit. However, as a consumer, to be able to get the information of the load profile for the feeder level, for the distribution level, would be very difficult. So I would say this tool is primarily for utilities, discoms in that case, as well as policymakers and regulators to be able to use the information that they have and see how the integration of DER can help them. And in that note, if you want to determine how solar can help you and what benefits you can get from solar, we have another webinar this coming Saturday, which will help you determine an economical feasible rooftop solar capacity. So that tool could probably help the consumer or the user directly who wants to install solar. I hope I have answered that question.
Yes, you did. And how does this particular tool help in research? What areas of research in DER does this, would this be helpful to?
So if what I would
sorry to interrupt, because as you said that when we are getting even when somebody is doing the research, they would actually need the local information, right? And to put exact details of that particular area. So does this include collaboration, or do you guys, if suppose I want to do a research, would you be able to collaborate with the utility company and provide me with data to do whatever analysis is there, or no?
There were multiple questions there, so I would take one by one to answer the latest or the last question that you asked. What we are trying to achieve from this tool is that if you make an account, for example, if as we have made an account, we have uploaded some profiles that are already existing or that we were able to get from one of the collaborations that we had done. Now we have made this data repository public. So if you are doing a simulation to find out how the analysis can be done at this particular feeder, you can use the existing data that is available on the tool. However, we specifically will not be able to share any information with you or provide you more information that cannot be shared. So sometimes we agree that when we do collaboration, there are non-disclosure agreements that are being signed, and these non-disclosure agreements do not allow us to share that information. However, whatever information that we have already uploaded has been approved and is able to be shared publicly. Hence, we have uploaded this information there, and that can be freely used.
Okay.
To address your first question, how researchers can use this? Well, I understand that we need data, and without data, we are not able to do this analysis or do any analysis in that sense. And that's why we wanted, or we rather would encourage people to upload the information that they have and they can share publicly, so that many others can use that data to at least get an estimate of how solar, when integrated on distribution network, can benefit the discoms, or can benefit in what way? By giving us avoided cost, that is the network benefits, by giving us a societal benefit as well. So I understand the problem where we need data, and to get data gets a little difficult. That's why we think that it would be really nice if people who are able or who have the information can upload it, and researchers can then use it to do the analysis and see how the integration of DER may or may not help in help in the distribution network.
All right. And how is this data protected? Yeah, go ahead.
No, maybe you finish your question.
Because then, like we see, there are a lot of privacy issues and ethical means hacking, and that might also be there. So how do you protect that data of your customers or anybody who is uploading it?
So when you make a profile, we have a checkbox asking if you want to share this data or not. In case if you do not check that data, checkbox, then all the information that you have uploaded will be publicly available. We will assume that you want to share this information and it will be publicly available. If you click that checkbox saying that you do not want to share this data, then we will not show this on public tool, or rather it will not be available to anyone who logs in and has an account in Solva, but it will be available only to the user that has uploaded the information.
Okay. And just a last question. This does not have any distribution connection information, right? Distributed connected systems or any distribution area. Network area. It means like in, for example, Auroville. in Auroville, like where all the how the distribution is taking place, the whole map of it. It doesn't have, right?
No, we do not have the map in the sense that, for example, if correct me if I'm wrong, you would like to see if on a feeder level how the distribution transformers are connected and what load, where they are connected, how far they are connected, and what load they take. Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes.
No, we do not have that, but it would be a great addition where we could then allow the users to see how it behaves from substation to DT level. So if you select a DT and you are connected to a certain feeder and that feeder is connected to a certain substation, then you could map that and see, but currently we do not have that.
Yeah, because that has then the privacy issue that is not allowed. That's the reason I was asking.
Okay, okay.
Then hack it. That's the reason. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a question by Mr. Barua, and he asks that as per the webinar, users can put the data as required. I think he was answering to one of the questions there, I guess. In case of avoided cost outside India, then they need to change the currency. Is there any provision? So, Mr. Barua, to answer this simply, I think how we have designed the distribution network is very particular to Indian context. So to be able to use this abroad would need for us to do the changes on the back end to accommodate how the distribution network for that particular area or in that particular country is allowed. And in for the Solva tool, it is specific in that case to the distribution network or rather how it is designed in the Indian context. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. I would still invite more questions if there are any. Any comments from you, Harish? During what are your opinions about the questions and answers that came in during the session?
No, it was pretty good. I mean, so I think we are on track. Yeah, so just I also wanted to add upon to this Vedangi's question that what is the data security that we have for the data that they are inputting, and I think you have pretty much answered that as well. That we have given a provision, a privacy setting for each and every project where the user will be able to enable or disable that the other user can see the data that we have given, and so that is one pretty useful provision which the users can make use of. Overall, yeah, I think we've covered pretty much. If there are any other questions, yeah, we could take it up or we can call it a day.
Yes, I had. Can we change the settings anytime? Like first, if we have allowed, and then suppose I'm working on some site which I don't want to show to the public, can I again change the setting? That provision available?
Yes, you can do that. It's there in your account settings. Maybe if I can show you, I can show you where it is so that you can then find out and see how and what is done. So let me just share the screen again. I hope the screen is visible to you. So as you can see, this is my profile setting. This is the Solva admin profile setting. And I can click here and see permit project data to be shared publicly. So if you have selected this beyond a certain point, let's say after 1 month, for 1 month, you wanted your privacy and you have not selected this, then whatever data you have uploaded during this time will not be shared. But the moment you activate this and you save the settings, then whatever data you are going to upload henceforth will be public. I hope that is what you asked?
It is not site specific. It is complete or
It's your
no.
profile. It's your profile.
Okay.
So, for example, if as soon as you make a profile and you are doing an analysis where you do not want to share the data, so you click on this, you uncheck this, that means that you do not want this data to be shared publicly, and then you do your analysis. And during that period, whatever data and information you have uploaded will not be shared publicly. After that period of time, in case if you want to share or you're open to share the data, you can check this box, save your settings, and after making this change, whatever data you upload will then be shared publicly.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions before we end the session? So as mentioned in the chat, I have already put in my email address. Feel free to connect and see, and we can try to clear your doubts as soon as possible. If not, thank you so much for your time, and have a nice evening. I hope the session was informative, and I hope you take away something from this session.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Before going, I would like to inform that we have a feedback form. Maybe you could share the feedback form in the chat, and then you can fill the feedback form before you leave. Have a nice evening. Thank you, Harish, for your time. Thank you, Sangeeta and Meg, for your support as well.